אבקש להזמין את פרופסור גרשון גרינברג, שאתם רואים, Preparing for Balfour, Early Religious Zionist Thinkers in America. פרופסור גרינברג, אהבתו לציוני ללא גבול, ללא שיעור, כמו שאומרים ביידיש, on shear, אז הוא ביקש להציג אותו רק עם ה-affiliation הארץ ישראלי שלו. פרופסור גרינברג הוא פרופסור אורח למחשבת ישראל באוניברסיטה העברית, תחום מחקריו, הגות דתית השוואתית, תגובות דתיות בזמן השואה, אם אני לא טועה הוא הוציא על כך ספר עם פרופסור אסף ידידיה, והגות יהודית באירופה ובאמריקה במאה הי"ט, ויחסי אמריקה וארץ הקודש, ועל כך נשמע עכשיו.
Preparing for Balfour, Early Religious Zionist Thinkers in America. Zionist thinking assumed different forms among American Jews at the turn of the 19th century. Reformers channeled Messianic thinking into the new Zion of America, while criticizing Orthodox Jews for praying for Zion in the land of Israel. Samuel Hirsch, for example, considered what the Orthodox were doing as a betrayal of the American flag, adding that with their hope for return to Palestine to await the Messiah, they should felt out of place in America. The Orthodox themselves saw no conflict between faithful citizenship in America and hopes for Geulah. In his 1897 Ba'acharit Hayamim, Abraham Lesser of Cincinnati clarified that America was the place for Judaism in the present, the land of Israel their place in the distant future. Moreover, redemption was up to God. Its only partly natural aspect had to do with God's changing the hearts of the world's leaders to have the people of Israel gather in the Holy Lands. Sources, unresearched until now, disclose that religious Zionists struck a path in between forces below and forces above in achieving redemption through the land of Israel, with initiative below dominating. Contemptuous of American Jewish culture with its materialism and assimilation, which included Reform Judaism, while yearning for the Torah and divine sanctity of the Holy Land, these religious Zionists advocated a natural, historically grounded effort to return and restore the land, with a focus on purchasing property. But they also awaited intervention from above by God to move rulers of the world to lead the effort. That waiting, it turned out, would end 17 years later when England would lead the effort to resolve the historical vis-a-vis trans-historical role of the ruler and open the flow between Itaruta dili Tata and Itaruta dili Ila, namely the Balfour Declaration and the League of Nations at San Remo, bringing time and eternity together, for they constituted Itchalta de Geula. First, profane America. Shimon Rashi Finkelstein came to America in 1886 following his study at Slobodki Yeshiva, and he and his son, JT Jewish Theological Seminary Chancellor Lewis, would visit Palestine in 1925. In Bikurei Anavim, published in Chicago in 1899, then in Syracuse, New York, Finkelstein wrote about Rabba Bar Chana's walk in the desert in Baba Batra 73. He ran into some geese who were so fat that their feathers were falling out and oil dripped into pools underneath. Finkelstein identified the geese with American Jews fattened by material excess tied to assimilation, who were so obese that they could not lift themselves off the ground and ascend spiritually with Torah, and thereby help to delay redemption. In Leket Yosef, published New York 1906, Joseph Mayer Levin of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, like the others, he had a relationship with Elkanan Spector, paired assimilation with anti-Semitism. American Jews were stuck on a burning ship, that is, the flame of anti-Semitism. The only option was to leap into the sea of assimilation. American Jews were caught between anti-Semites who were out to further to torture and murder, to erase the name Jew from under heaven, and severing themselves from Israel's sacred law, nation, and land. Levin made his point to a local Zionist group graphically. excuse me for this, while assimilationists Jews stained themselves with ejaculations of despicable desire and adultery, anti-Semitic animals of prey were ambushing Jewish daughters and handing them over to houses of prostitution. In Buffalo, New York, in 1900, Yehoshua Zinger, who was born in Ponevezh and arrived in America after 20 years as cantor in Russia, focused on anti-Semitism in his essay on the land of Israel in his Zikaron Basefer, published in Vilnius. Drawing contemporary comparisons with the Dreyfus Affair in France and the Leopold Hilsen blood libel in Austria, he told of youths running wild in Buffalo, attacking anything Jewish. They could drag a Jew through the streets with impunity, knowing that nobody would stop them. The police would look the other way, and the courts would release them. The accusation that Jews were murdering Christian children for blood for matzot was widespread. Zinger himself had offered matzah to a Christian neighbor, which was refused. Zinger expounded upon Jews' repulsion of murder and blood, the fate of Klein, shechita, rejecting eggs with the smallest trace of blood. The neighbor listened attentively, smiled in agreement, and went home without the matzah. Zinger observed, with generations of brethren Christians holding to the lie, it would take more than evidence presented by one Jew to change his mind. Holy Palestine. The alienation and contempt vis-a-vis American Jewish culture expressed by these religious Zionists stood in contrast to the sublimity of the land of Palestine. Rabbi Bar Chana, Finkelstein brought to mind, was once walking in the desert where he encountered an Arab merchant who could smell a bit of earth and tell how far away he was from water. The water was Torah. The Torah was distant in America, where pursuit of money consumed one's time, but emerged from the very earth into the air of Palestine, Ketuvot, 110b. There, Jewish souls naturally felt God's presence. Rabbi Chia Bar Gamda, for example, kissed the earth as a source of Torah. Zinger concluded that the more American Jews distanced themselves from the land of Israel, the further they distanced themselves from the Jewish religion of Torah. The land, however, touched the Jewish soul. Like a precious stone, the earth of Palestine drew the nefesh to work it with joy, with each clod of earth sacred in their eyes. Moshe Zivitz of Pittsburgh, who had studied at the Telz Yeshiva, was and ordained by Eliezer Gordon, Alexander Spector, arrived in Baltimore in 1880. He wrote in Cheker Dat how exiled Jews cried because Torah and Yerot. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll have to speak very quietly. Thank you. Moshe Zivitz of Pittsburgh, who had studied at the Telz Yeshiva, ordained by Eliezer Gordon and Achan and Spector, arrived in Baltimore in 1880. He wrote in Cheker Hadat, published in Jerusalem in 1898, how exiled Jews cried because Torah and Yirat Shamayim were absent in their lives, while the land of Israel awaited in itself suited to the Torah to such an extent that Jews there inhaled it from the pure spiritual air. Should Torah's light go out, it would reignite immediately with even a greater flame. Mitzvat Yishuv Haaretz reflected and implemented the Torah divine sanctity of the land. Zinger introduced a variety of texts. Sifrei related that when Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera and others were traveling abroad and suddenly remembered the land of Israel, they declared that dwelling in the land of Israel is equivalent to all other mitzvot and returned home immediately. Ketuvot 110 had it that it was better to reside in a Gentile majority city in the land of Israel than in a Jewish majority one outside. Indeed, a person residing outside was to be considered as without God. One in the land was to be considered as having God. To give to you the land of heaven of Canaan to be your God in Leviticus. According to Sefer Hasidim, the suffering and crying of the people of Israel over the ages was due to despising the land. It was a mitzvah say to live in the land. Every Jew was to love the land of Israel and ascend to it from the ends of the earth, and do so with the longing of a son for his mother's bosom. The redemption, the pidyon of the land, accelerated the Geula. Initiative from below, Be'ita. Accordingly, these early Zionist figures held that American Jews faced a radical choice between religious degeneration in the U.S. and religious revival in the land of Israel. The choice for the latter implied taking action. These thinkers emulated the approach of Zionist forerunners Nathan Friedland, Kalisha, Alkali, and identified themselves with the process of historical time, Be'ita, rather than miraculous accelerated sequence, Achishena. Zivitz held that when the land returned, when the land returns to Zion in Shir HaMa'alot, meant that the people first had to awaken the desire to return to Zion. Then God would have them actually return. Levin recognized that salvation would come to American Jewry Achishena should they fail to proceed Be'ita, but they should indeed must not wait. As they faced death by immolation or drowning, allegorically, a rescue ship, that of Zion, was appearing on the horizon. There was no time to sit on folded hands and casting their love on God to redeem them. God was the true Redeemer, and complete redemption came only through God. But Jewry must not passively await a miracle. It had to leap onto the vessel of Zion. Zinger contextualized his own path. He criticized secular Zionists, he called them maskilim, who claimed that salvation came about by human hands alone, and who mocked the Yereim with their messianic images of a poor man on a donkey. The images were obviously allegorical, while the ridicule generated contempt for Yereim, who admirably awoke at night for Tikkun Chatzot and cry over Zion, and sighed over the reciting the words about Zion in the Shemona Esrei. Zinger, for his part, accepted the miraculous dimension to prophecies about Zion. But Zinger took the position of advocating the advance toward Zion in natural, active, and timely terms, anticipating that God would respond and complete the process miraculously. And he believed that Theodor Herzl represented the two-stage process. While Herzl was certainly neither the Messiah nor God's messenger, insofar as the voices of masses sounded the voice of God, Herzl did come from God. The voice to establish Zion was heard across the world, the globe. It followed generations of expulsions during which no one thought about purchasing land in Palestine. Quote, "Is this not a good sign?" Zinger found support for a natural initiative coming first, followed by God's action, with God's presence disclosed below retroactively in the sources. For example, Malbim spoke of 3 stages of historical development in building Jerusalem's strong fortress: return of Judah and Benjamin from exile, the judges establishing a government, establishing the Davidic kingdom, and eventual messianic rule under God. With regard to the 3 oaths of Ketubot 1:1a, namely the people of Israel not to return en masse and force, rebel against the nations, while the nations were not to overly oppress the people of Israel, Zinger cited Rashi's pointing to the need to determine the timing of the oaths and to return ma'at ma'at. The Midrash, see Sota 35a, related that while the ark was to carry its bearers, God had the bearers carry it in the name of Dibe itaruta deletita etaer itaruta delitata. Accordingly, these Chovevei Tzion-minded thinkers, Zinger was influenced by Nathan Friedland in particular, thought dialectically with regard to return: active below, passive vis-a-vis above, with God also present in natural action. But initiative from below was front and center, and raising money to purchase land in Palestine was its particular concrete focus: purchasing the land. Referring to the Jewish Colonial Bank in London, which was accepting small amounts of shekels, Zinger wrote that anyone with a clenched fist and would not give even that amount annually would be shamed by God when God gathered the dispersed for redemption and asked for a list of Dorshei Tzion. Every Jew had the obligation to buy land, a mitzvah tantamount to restoring the ruins of Jerusalem, Barachot 6a, and a part of the Idchalta di Geula. The Chovevei Tzion royalty all were behind it, Zinger said. Friedland, Sofer, Eliachai Meisel, Menachem Gumpel, Elia David Teumin, Yitzhak Yaakov Reines, Eliyahu Gutma, and above all, Chovevei Tzion President Shmuel Moed Level. Zinger pointed to Kalischer's Haskoma for Yosef Chen. In it, he cited Rabbi Yochanan's explanation as to why Omri merited sovereignty. Quote, because he added a region to Palestine and brought the hill of Samaria of Shemin for 2 talents of silver and built on it. Given the priority of financing purchase of the land, Zinger turned to the wealthy to start the process. The north in Isaiah 43 referred to the wealthy, and the south to the learned, the learned and the poor. He's quoting that, I will say to the north, give thou up, and to the south, etc. Once the wealthy committed themselves, Zinger thought, the poor would follow automatically. As to the Araim, they were already stirred toward redemption, whether Be'ita or Achishena, and needed no inducement. From Be'ita, Itaruta Dilitata, to Achishena, Itaruta Dili'ila. Accordingly, despair over America vis-a-vis the draw to sanctity in the land of Israel impelled human action within the structure of God's relationship to history. But there was a problem in the move from natural steps to God's miraculous takeover. Were rulers who stood in between of Be'ita or of Achishena? As a divine oath was involved, namely Jewry was not to revolt against the ruler, the issue had to be resolved. Our thinkers were divided on the matter. Citing Ketuvat 1.1a, Rashi commentary about the authority of kings, Zinger emphasized that rulers must approve the purchase of property before Jews could move ahead. Zinger recalled that his teacher, Beryl Zabilna, citing Abarbanel on Psalms 147, held that redemption would take place if and when it arose to the will of kings to restore the land of Israel, whereupon anyone who wanted to ascend could. And the Shnei Luchot HaBrit stated that the authority of the nations was required prior to purchase, which in turn would accelerate a redemption from above. Without the authority, since the people were sworn not to revolt against the government and take the land by force, absence of that authority would necessarily delay redemption. But Finkelstein thought otherwise. Citing Yehoshua ben Hananiah's encounter with a little boy on the rabbi's way to town, when he asked him for directions, as Baba Batra 73, he was told that the path was short and long. The sage proceeded on his way, only to discover that the path was blocked by gardens. The short and easy path, it turned out, would be longer and difficult. The long one turned out to be short. American Jews, Finkelstein declared, believed that if they remained good, obedient, and quiet citizens, the rulers of America would be moved to return them to Palestine. They were wrong, Finkelstein said. To the contrary, that attitude would only distance themselves even further from their goal. Finkelstein invoked the ancient Israelites wisely taking the long path out of Egypt so as not to become embroiled with Philistines and end up longing to return to Egypt. Resolution. The Balfour Declaration, 17 years later, settled the differences between the rabbis and the divine human tension in the position of the ruler, which stymied the passage from active Be'ita to passive Achishena, levels of achieving redemption. For the declaration mandated rulers of the world to act in history on God's behalf. When the declaration was issued, the Reformed Jewish 1918 CCR conference came out with categorical opposition to Palestine as the Jewish homeland, adding that Jews in America belong to the nation of America. The 1919 Union of American Hebrew Congregations issued a statement declaring that America is our Zion. Here, In the home of religious liberty, we have aided in the founding of a new Zion, which is the fruition of the old. When it came to the Orthodox, the president of the New York Board of Rabbis, Baruch Meir Klein, made it clear in his She'alu Shalom Yerushalayim, published in New York in 1918, that redemption was transnational and its timing was beyond human grasp. Jews must not precipitate return. Moreover, settlement had to be preceded by religious revival and exile. The Balfour Declaration did, however, resolve the issue of the ruler in the dynamics of redemption for religious Zionism at the turn of the century, and thereby energize the religious Zionist perspective. In Cincinnati, Avram Yitzhak Horowitz from Lomza wrote in his Emek Yehoshaphat, published in St. Louis, 1918, that God's redeeming spirit, as in the temple will not be built by sword or might, but by my spirit in Zechariah, was manifest in the Balfour Declaration. God, having instilled in the hearts of the leadership of enlightened nations the good thought of returning to the people of Israel what was wrongly taken from them, standing with England and Balfour's starting with England and Balfour's declaration to Rothschild, given that the year of redemption had come. And of course, Chaim Hirshenson in Hoboken in Malki Bakodesh, Volume 3. He declared that anyone aware of Balfour and the surrounding events and reacted routinely and coldly was in denial of higher providence. Over the millennium, Hirshenson wrote, when God thought to bring redemption, the people were unprepared and it was not realized. Nevertheless, the people continued to hope in terms of Be'ika Achishena. Now, they had been advancing every day closer to the messianic goal. Indeed, the land of Israel's resurrection by England and its allies and the adoption of Balfour at San Remo, Hirshenson said, constituted passage from Itta Ruta Dilitata to Itta Ruta Dili'ila, namely, Itchalta de Geula and Ikvada de Meshicha. This time, he said, the people better be ready and dress appropriately for the chuppah and the wedding feast.